So here's a question for today. Why are 95% of your bile salts recycled? Now I know you've been thinking about this for a very long time. Well, I finally created a video just for you because there's this idea that your gallbladder is unneeded and bile is something that is highly confused, highly underrated, ignored, especially when we get into the gallbladder. In fact, many doctors will say the gallbladder is unnecessary. Well, it's only necessary if you don't understand what it does, because that gallbladder concentrates this bile, but the gallbladder concentrates the bile so it can create the effects that it needs to create. In fact, there's 6 really important things that bile will do. So your body actually recycles bile because it is vitally necessary and important. In fact, it recycles it 6 to 10 times every single day. And on top of that, your liver makes bile. It's called primary bile salts. And your microbiome makes bile. It's called secondary bile salts. I'll come back to this, but I'm just trying to increase your awareness on the importance of bile in your body and how many conditions are connected to problems with your bile. It's quite extensive. All right, let's first talk about the 6 things that bile will do. And there's other things, but these are the 6 most important things. Number 1, it helps you absorb fats. In fact, most fats are dependent on bile for the absorption. And if you remove the gallbladder, you no longer have the concentration, so you're going to be deficient in bile. All right, number 2, it helps you absorb fat-soluble nutrients. Notice I didn't say vitamins, because fat-soluble nutrients not only are the vitamin A, D, E, K1, K2, and also the omega-3 fatty acids, which are very, very important, as well as the phytonutrients. Many phytonutrients, like all the carotenoids, which is a pre-vitamin A type phytonutrient, it's fat-soluble. So those things are dependent on bile. Like lutein, for example, is a carotenoid that helps prevent macular degeneration. So there's just a lot of things that are dependent on this bile. Also, bile helps prevent SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We don't want bacteria, or very much of it, in our small intestine, because if there is friendly bacteria in your small intestine, it will then eat up your nutrients. It competes for nutrients. So there'll be less nutrients going into your small intestine because the microbes need them to survive. So you're going to be deficient in nutrients. You're going to have a lot of gas, bloating, overgrowth of other pathogens, unfriendly bacteria. So bile salts have antimicrobial properties. So they basically go through the small intestine, kill off the microbes, make sure there's nothing growing in there, and then get reabsorbed at the last part of the small intestine before it goes into the large intestine. And the whole cycle starts again. So this is very, very important in preventing this. So many people have this. So if you eat, especially like fiber or probiotics, and you bloat, then chances are you can have SIBO. Number 4, bile salts help regulate cholesterol. Now, there's nothing wrong with cholesterol, but there is a type of cholesterol, which is the small dense particles, the LDL particles, that can invade the vascular system and create damage. So bile just happens to regulate cholesterol. So if there's too much cholesterol consumed, or your body makes too much, the excess goes out with the bile. Without bile, you can't get rid of the excess. And cholesterol can then back up into the skin, and you'll see certain conditions, like people will have little cholesterol spots around their eyelids. They need bile salts. Also, bile salts help rid toxins and poisons, heavy metals, pesticides, very important. And bile also helps with your immune system. Now, if you don't have enough bile, or it's not being recycled because there's liver damage, let's say you have a fatty liver, or your liver's inflamed, or you have cirrhosis, or you have some type of malabsorption issue in the small intestine or the large, and you're deficient in bile, here are some things that could happen. Cholesterol can go high. Like I said before, high cholesterol is not a problem, but it could be a problem if it's the wrong kind. Okay, number 2, gallstone formation or sludge in the bile ducts or the gallbladder, which can then back things up into your liver and cause pain over the right side over here, or right side of the neck right here, or shoulder, or right side fibromyalgia, or even pancreatitis, because you can have sludge or stone stuck in one of the ducts and create a lot of pain in your digestive system. So bile salts help keep things flowing. Number 3, low vitamin A. This can relate to all sorts of things related to sinus, vision, like can't see in the dark, dry eyes, blurry vision, poor immune system. Vitamin D. Vitamin D has to do with heart, and it's a very powerful antioxidant, and also it helps fertility and your pituitary as a precursor to making certain hormones. And then vitamin K1 to prevent unnecessary bleeding, and K2 to remove calcium from the wrong places. So removing it from the arteries and the joints and keeping it in the bone. Low omega-3 fatty acids, which is very common. Great percentage of the population just does not have enough omega-3. So they have real heavy on the omega-6. So they'll have all sorts of inflammatory issues. And if you're low on omega-3, it could increase blood sugar issues and have more problems with insulin resistance. Number 5, you're not going to be satisfied after a meal. So you eat a meal and you're just not satisfied because you don't have the bile to pull in the fats to go to the brain and turn off the hunger signals. We've already talked about SIBO. 7, constipation, because bile kind of lubricates the colon. So without enough bile, things get backed up. You also need bile to help convert T4 to T3. So that could be the reason why you have hypothyroidism, something wrong with that conversion. And then you take Synthroid or T4 and you wonder why it's not really working, because the problem is it's not being converted to T3, which is the active form. And then because bile helps rid toxins, you're not able to detoxify the liver. So things back up and you become very, very toxic. Now, one last point I wanted to mention about primary and secondary bile salts. This is might be a new thing for you, so I'm going to try to explain it very simply. So what is the difference between primary and secondary bile? Well, primary is conjugated. This means you're attaching an amino acid, like either taurine or glycine, to the bile to make it more water soluble, so it can move and also be absorbed into your intestines, right? What happens when this conjugated bile goes through the intestines, at the very end part, certain microbes take off these amino acids and then make them insoluble. So they're less water soluble, so they can be recycled. So you have less absorption. So that's the difference between the primary and secondary. All right, thanks for watching.